When entering World War II, the German army, the Wehrmacht, was confident that it possessed one of the most advanced infantry weapon systems and doctrines in the world. At the center of that system was the Kar98k, an improved variant of the Gewehr 98 rifle that had served in World War I. The Kar98k was regarded as the pinnacle of bolt-action rifle design, solid, durable, accurate at long range, and proven valuable over decades. Its standard configuration featured an internal magazine loaded with 5-round stripper clips, chambered for the powerful 7.92 Kauth 57mm Mauser cartridge. After each shot, the shooter had to work the bolt by hand to eject the spent casing and feed a new round, a slower procedure, but one that ensured high reliability and accuracy. Nazi Germany and the Wehrmacht High Command believed the Kar98k fully met the demands of modern war. This belief sprang from a long military tradition that prized individual skill and long-range marksmanship. Official doctrine, reflected in training manuals, emphasized that the German soldier is a marksman, not a suppressive shooter by volume. One well-placed shot is worth 20 wasted rounds. That philosophy led the Germans to train their infantry broadly as precision shooters. Rather than encouraging rapid, high-volume fire, tactically, the Kar98k was not designed to create dense suppressive fire. That role belonged to light and medium machine guns, especially the MG34 and MG42, which were considered the backbone of German infantry. German squad organization revolved around the squad's machine gun, the MG42, with its extremely high rate of fire, 1,200–1,500 rounds per minute, formed the nucleus, while Kar98k riflemen were tasked with protection, ammunition supply, and long-range fire support. This produced a clear division of labor. Concentrated fire came from machine guns, while individual rifles played a supporting role. In the early campaigns, Poland in 1939, France in 1940, and even the opening phase in the Soviet Union in 1941, this doctrine proved effective. The blitzkrieg combination of mechanized speed, air power, and the firepower of German machine guns allowed the Wehrmacht to win quick victories. Battles were often fought in open areas with plenty of space, where accurate long-range shooting remained useful. At that time, the Germans saw almost no drawbacks in retaining a bolt-action rifle as the standard infantry weapon. However, as early as the German encounters with American forces in North Africa in 1942–43, unfavorable signs began to appear. American troops carried the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic rifle capable of firing at about 1.5 times the rate of the Kar98k. While German soldiers had to operate the bolt by hand after each shot, American soldiers could simply squeeze the trigger again. The gap between the doctrine of one precise shot and the reality of sustained suppressive fire started to become apparent. Reports from the Tunisian front recorded German troops frequently taken aback by the dense fire from relatively inexperienced American units on a phenomenon that could not be explained solely by individual skill. Nevertheless, the German command clung to traditional beliefs. They argued that tactical superiority, combat experience, and the discipline of the Wehrmacht would make up for any equipment shortcomings. This confidence was partly the result of overconfidence following early victories and partly pragmatic. Producing semi-automatic rifles on the scale required was much more complex than manufacturing bolt-action weapons. With German industry already under enormous pressure from total war, a wholesale change of the infantry small arms system was practically impossible. Thus, the Kar98k continued to be mass-produced right up to 1945. More than 14 million were manufactured and issued to most German infantry units from the beginning to the end of the war. Though its power in the hands of veteran marksmen could not be denied, the Kar98k increasingly revealed its obsolescence. On the modern battlefield, where much fighting took place at ranges under 300 meters, rate of fire and the ability to sustain continuous fire mattered more than absolute long-range accuracy. This was the fundamental weakness in German infantry doctrine, a weakness they were unable to remedy in time when faced with the semi-automatic firepower of the M1 Garand. While the Germans clung to the Kar98k and the philosophy that one well-aimed shot is worth more than a dozen wasted rounds, the U.S. Army followed a completely different path. As early as the mid-1930s, the U.S. War Department recognized the limitations of bolt-action rifles and resolved to equip all infantry with a semi-automatic rifle. The result was the M1 Garand, Designed by French-Canadian engineer John Cantius Garand and officially adopted in 1936, the M1 Garand offered clear advantages over any bolt-action rifle of its time. It used a gas-operated mechanism that automatically ejected the spent casing and chambered a new round after each shot. Its standard 8-round en-bloc clip was inserted directly into the internal magazine. When emptied, the clip was ejected with its iconic ping, and the soldier could simply insert a fresh clip to continue firing. No more reloading with 5-round stripper clips or manually cycling a bolt. American soldiers could sustain near-continuous fire. Compared to the Kar98k, the difference in rate of fire was dramatic. A well-trained German rifleman might fire about 15 accurate shots per minute with the Kar98k. By contrast, the average American infantryman could sustain 20 to 24 shots per minute with the Garand, even more in close combat. The numbers might seem modest, but in real battle, a 30–50% increase translated into 1.5 times the firepower, a massive advantage when scaled up to squad, platoon, or company level. More importantly, the Garand reflected a different mindset in combat doctrine. With it, each American soldier became a source of suppressive fire on his own. A 12-man squad armed with Garands could deliver a volume of fire equal to, or greater, than a German squad that relied almost entirely on a single MG42. This allowed U.S. troops to employ the marching fire tactic, advancing while firing steadily to keep the enemy's heads down. At ranges under 300 meters, where most engagements occurred, the Garand held absolute superiority. Reports from North Africa, Italy, and especially Normandy confirmed that German troops were often shocked by the sheer density of American fire. Traditional German tactics, like popping up to shoot after assuming the enemy had paused to reload, became useless. With the Garand, there was no pause. American soldiers could fire continuously, switch targets rapidly, and suppress the enemy even while maneuvering. This difference shifted the balance in countless situations. In retreat, the Garand allowed U.S. troops to fire while falling back, creating effective rearguard fire, something almost impossible with bolt actions. In attack, every foxhole or small fire team could generate heavy firepower without waiting for machine guns or artillery support. In effect, the Garand democratized firepower, distributing continuous suppressive ability to every soldier rather than concentrating it in a few specialized weapons. This was the defining difference between U.S. and German infantry from 1943 to 1945. Even though German troops were often considered better trained and more experienced, the reality was that every American soldier with a Garand wielded overwhelming firepower. As General George S. Patton famously declared, "The M1 Garand is the greatest battle implement ever devised." This was not exaggeration, but a reflection of how profoundly it changed the nature of infantry warfare. The M1 Garand was more than just a rifle. It embodied America's industrial and military philosophy, to give every ordinary soldier a technological edge that compensated for lack of combat experience. In the hands of hastily trained draftees, it turned them into a force capable of overpowering even the hardened veterans of the Wehrmacht. Its advantage went far beyond technical specifications. It reshaped morale, tactics, and ultimately, the outcome of the battlefield itself. The difference between the Kar98k and the M1 Garand was not just theoretical or confined to the training ground, it became most apparent on the battlefield. From the very first clashes in North Africa in late 1942, the Germans realized their opponents carried a strange new weapon. American soldiers could fire continuously without pausing to work a bolt. In reports sent back, many German officers complained that U.S. squads often unleashed such dense fire that German troops were forced to stay pinned down, unable to raise their heads to observe or return fire. During the Tunisia campaign, the Americans' first encounter with Rommel's seasoned forces, U.S. tactical and experiential shortcomings were obvious. Yet one consistent strength stood out: the M1 Garand. Even when American units were driven from positions or retreating in disorder, the Garand's firepower allowed them to inflict losses on the enemy and maintain enough distance to regroup. It enabled ordinary soldiers, far less rigorously trained than their opponents, to generate significant lethal power. On the Italian front in 1943–44, this difference grew even sharper. Italy's rugged mountains, clustered villages, and close combat distances, usually under 300 meters, were perfect conditions for the Garand. American troops could seize houses and streets using continuous suppressive fire, while Germans were hampered by the slower rate of the Kar98k. In memoirs, many Wehrmacht veterans admitted they increasingly had to rely on machine guns and mortars to offset the imbalance, since riflemen alone could not match the individual firepower of U.S. troops. The contrast reached its peak in Normandy in the summer of 1944. On the blood-soaked beaches, as Americans advanced under the storm of MG-42 fire, it was the Garand that allowed them to maintain constant pressure with every step forward. In the hedgerow battles and village firefights that followed, the Garand proved devastating. U.S. squads could split into small groups, maneuver while firing rapidly, and pin down German troops in their defenses, denying them the chance to counterattack. There are many German anecdotes about this experience. A veteran panzer grenadier recalled during the Battle of St. Lo how stunned he was to see American troops advancing while never stopping their fire. He remembered the Garand's signature sound, the metallic ping as the clip ejected, immediately followed by the crack of a new volley. We were used to enemies having to pause to reload, but here the pause hardly existed. Every time we showed our heads, it cost us. The Ardennes campaign in late 1944 further highlighted the Garand's power. In the opening chaos, when many U.S. units were surprised and thrown into disorder, small groups of American soldiers managed to hold off larger German forces thanks to their rifles. In key towns like Bastogne or critical road junctions in the Ardennes, squads of just 5 to 10 Americans generated such dense fire that Germans often believed they faced a force many times larger. This was one reason several strongpoints held out despite overwhelming German numerical superiority. In close quarters fighting, the Garand also displayed remarkable flexibility. At short ranges, its rapid fire made it behave almost like a submachine gun, allowing U.S. soldiers to shoot while maneuvering through urban combat. German troops, by contrast, had to rely heavily on the MP-40, a weapon with limited range or attempt to drag along the cumbersome MG-42. In Iodika, the intermediate range of 50-200 meters, the dead zone for the MP-40, the Garand reigned. Supreme psychological impact was another key factor. American soldiers armed with the Garand felt more confident, knowing they could fire more rounds than their opponents before reloading. Germans, on the other hand, often felt the strain of facing 1.5 times the volume of fire while being limited to 5-round reloads. Interrogation reports from captured German troops frequently mention the Garand as one of the reasons for the Americans' stubbornness in battle, since they were constantly suppressed and rarely found an opening to strike back. Of course, the Garand was not flawless. Its 8-round clip was sometimes seen as a limitation compared to later detachable magazines like those of the G43 or STG-44. The famous ping of the empty clip was occasionally exaggerated in battlefield tales, and in reality, amid the roar of combat, it was rarely noticed or exploitable. But these shortcomings were minor compared to the enormous advantages the Garand provided. From Tunisia to Berlin, battlefield experience proved that the M1 Garand was not just a personal weapon, but a systemic advantage for the entire U.S. Army. It enabled widespread suppressive tactics and embodied America's industrial capacity, equipping every soldier with superior firepower. This, in turn, helped sustain America's relentless offensive momentum, from the first landings in North Africa to the final battles in Europe. If on the battlefield the M1 Garand proved its overwhelming firepower superiority over the Kar98k, then on the home front, America's industrial advantage was the real factor that ensured this dominance could be sustained on a global scale. The United States not only possessed an advanced rifle design, but also the ability to turn it into reality with millions of units mass-produced and issued uniformly to its entire infantry force. Even before World War II broke out, America had prepared a vast foundation of military industry. After the Garand was officially adopted in 1936, Springfield Armory became the primary production center, equipped with modern assembly lines supported by the precision engineering sector. As the war expanded, production rapidly scaled up across major industrial corporations, including Winchester. As a result, between 1936 and 1945, more than 4 million M1 Garands were manufactured, a staggering number unprecedented for any semi-automatic rifle. This figure must be compared against Germany's efforts to reveal the gap. Throughout the war, Germany kept the Kar98k as its standard rifle, producing around 14 million units, yet it remained an outdated bolt-action design. When faced with the superior firepower of American and Soviet troops, Germany rushed to develop semi-automatic rifles such as the Gewehr 43 and, most notably, the Sturmgewehr 44, the world's first assault rifle. But production numbers were too limited to alter the battlefield. Only about 460,000 G43s and 425,000 STG-44s reached frontline units, mostly concentrated in select formations. By contrast, the Garand appeared in virtually every U.S. infantry unit, from Europe to the Pacific. This contrast reflected not only weapon design, but also national industrial philosophy and organization. The U.S. could mobilize its entire civilian economy for wartime production. Steel mills, machine shops, and automobile assembly lines were retooled to produce rifles, ammunition, and spare parts. High levels of standardization, modern mass production lines, and abundant raw materials enabled America to manufacture Garands at speed and with consistent quality. Germany, on the other hand, faced shortages of raw materials, constant bombing, and heavy reliance on forced labor, resulting in uneven weapon quality. Another major American advantage was ammunition logistics. The Garand used standard .30-06 Springfield rounds, already mass-produced since World War I. This ensured abundant ammunition for both training and combat. U.S. soldiers could fire extensively in practice, developing habits and proficiency with the Garand at a high level, while German troops were often rationed on training rounds due to shortages. On the battlefield, an American soldier typically received 120 rounds at deployment, with resupply readily available, a vital factor in maximizing the semi-automatic rifle's advantage. Beyond sheer numbers, the Garand proved the rugged reliability of standardized industrial products. Weighing about 4.3 kilo, it was durable, resistant to jamming, and could function well in the mud of Italy, the damp fields of Normandy, and the jungles of the Pacific. This reflected American manufacturing philosophy, not a refined or overly complex weapon, but a robust, uniform tool simple enough for millions of conscripted soldiers to operate effectively. By contrast, Germany's innovative weapons like the SEG-44 or G-43 suffered from the inherent flaws of an overstretched industry: inconsistent quality, limited production, and insufficient logistical support. One German soldier might carry a Kar98k, another a G-43, while only a select few elite units received the SEG-44. This lack of standardization complicated logistics, split ammunition supplies, and weakened battlefield coordination. Meanwhile, American troops could rely on their comrades carrying the same Garand. With interchangeable ammunition and parts, an enormous advantage in combat efficiency. America's industrial strength also extended its advantage to allies. Through the Lend-Lease program, significant numbers of Garands were supplied to Free French forces, Britain, and even China. After the war, the Garand continued to be produced and widely used within NATO, becoming a standard infantry rifle across many nations well into the 1950s and 1960s. This long-lasting legacy was a clear testament to the enduring impact of U.S. industrial power. In short, while the Garand represented breakthrough technical thinking, it was America's vast industrial capacity that transformed it from a design on paper into real battlefield power. During World War II, no other nation could uniformly equip its infantry with such an advanced semi-automatic rifle. This was one of the crucial reasons the U.S. could sustain continuous offensives from 1943 onward, rather than being bogged down in attritional stalemate. Put another way, the Garand was not just the rifle of the American soldier, but also a symbol of the United States' comprehensive industrial capability, a nation able to turn technical advantage into strategic dominance, and in doing so, play a decisive role in ultimate victory. When the final shots of World War II fell silent, the world looked back on the lessons of war to prepare for the future. For the infantryman, one of the most important lessons was the difference the M1 Garand had made. The contest between the Garand and the Kar98k was not just a comparison of two rifles, but a handover between two eras of infantry weaponry, from the age of bolt-action rifles to the age of semi-automatic and automatic arms. For more than 3 decades before the war, most major military powers remained loyal to bolt-action rifles. The Germans had the Kar98k, the British the Lee Enfield, the Japanese the Arisaka, and the Russians the Mosin Nagant. All were sturdy, accurate weapons, but limited by their single-shot reloading mechanisms. The M1 Garand, by being issued universally across the U.S. Army, proved that a semi-automatic rifle was entirely practical in modern war. After 1945, no major army would ever again consider the bolt-action rifle as its standard frontline weapon. The Garand's direct impact was seen in the wave of post-war rifle designs. The Soviet Union quickly introduced the SKS, and soon after, the legendary AK-47. France developed the MAS-49, Belgium the FN-FL, Britain experimented with the EM2 before adopting the FL, and West Germany later chose the G3. All reflected the same philosophy. Infantry rifles must be capable of sustained fire, higher rates of fire, and provide suppressive power at practical combat ranges. In this sense, the Garand paved the way for the assault rifle and battle rifle generations that would dominate the second half of the 20th century. The Garand's influence extended beyond technology, shaping doctrine and combat psychology. The philosophy of every soldier as an independent source of firepower became deeply embedded in U.S. military thinking, influencing squad and platoon organization. Instead of revolving around a single machine gun, American squads were designed around the combined firepower of multiple individuals. The tactic of marching fire, advancing while firing, became characteristic, used not only in World War II but also in Korea and Vietnam. In actual history, the Garand served long after the war. It remained the standard U.S. infantry weapon in the Korean War, 1950-1953. Where it faced the semi-automatic SKS and witnessed the growing presence of the AK-47. There, it continued to prove its reliability and firepower, though its 8-round clip showed limitations compared with detachable magazines. In the early years of the Vietnam War, the Garand was still widely used by South Vietnamese forces and U.S. allies, before gradually giving way to the M14 and M16. The Garand's legacy was also international. Through arms aid and sales, millions of Garands appeared worldwide, in France, Italy, Greece, South Korea, Taiwan, and across Latin America. Everywhere it was praised for durability and ease of use. For many smaller armies and resistance movements, the Garand was a symbol of modernity, a clear contrast to outdated bolt-action rifles. Even into the 1970s-1980s, Garands still appeared in the hands of militias in numerous conflicts. At the symbolic level, the Garand left an indelible mark. It was tied to the image of the American soldier in World War II, from the Normandy landings to Pacific beaches to the frozen mountains of Korea. To many Americans, the Garand was more than a rifle. It embodied industrial might, ingenuity, and determination to win. This is why General George Patton famously called it the greatest battle implement ever devised, in a line that has entered history and is recalled in every discussion of infantry weapons. The Garand's influence even reached beyond the military, entering culture and collective memory. Films about World War II, from Saving Private Ryan to Band of Brothers, placed the Garand at center stage, portraying it as the emblem of the ordinary American soldier. Among collectors and sport shooters today, it remains highly valued, not only for its historical significance but also for its smooth action, powerful yet stable shooting experience. In comparison with the Kar98k, its direct wartime rival, the difference is striking. The Kar98k continued to serve in smaller armies after the war, but was steadily replaced by semi-automatic and assault rifles. It became the legacy of an old era while the Garand pointed the way forward. One might say the Kar98k was the last pinnacle of bolt-action rifles, while the Garand was the first true foundation of the modern rifle age. On a broader level, the Garand also revealed a strategic lesson. Technical superiority only matters when paired with industrial capacity to deliver it on a large scale. An advanced design produced in only a few 100,000 units, like Germany's STG-44, could not change the outcome. By contrast, the Garand, produced in over 4 million units and issued across the board, transformed individual advantage into operational advantage and then into strategic dominance. This was a lesson many nations absorbed after the war, as they sought to connect weapons development with industrial strength. In conclusion, the M1 Garand's legacy lay not only in helping the U.S. and its allies win World War II, but in forever changing how the world understood infantry firepower. It closed the age of bolt-action rifles and opened the era of semi-automatic and assault rifles, where where rate of fire and suppressive ability became decisive. For this, the Garand deserves to be remembered as one of the most revolutionary weapons in military history.